For a lot of success teaching, there's a principle called intentionality. It's a principle of the mind sciences. It has to do with being purposefully focused, purposefully focused on what you're doing. Now, I've talked about this principle a little bit in the past, and one of the ways that I explain it is to recall the story of my son when he was about 3 years old. I was sitting in my recliner, I hear this big thud, and I'm thinking, what is that? It was like a sonic boom. It kind of shook the whole house. And then I get up and I walk around to each of the kids' bedrooms, and there's no noise, there's nothing going on, and we just put them to bed. So I was really hoping they'd already gone to sleep, and that was the end of it. I didn't really want to hear any noise from inside their door. So I had to listen to all the rooms, and I didn't hear anything. So I go back to my recliner, and I sit down, and a few minutes goes by, and then bam, I hear this again. And this time the whole wall next to me shakes. The pictures are flying off the wall, and kind of bouncing back. And I thought it was going to knock over my glass on my table. I'm like, wow, what is that? Are we having an earthquake in Texas? And we hadn't had any at that point. It was really a rare occurrence. And so I thought, that is so strange. And I got up and I walked around and checked the rooms again. And I hear just a really soft noise. So I crack the door to peek in. And I can't really see because the light is off. There's just a little bit of light coming in from the street light outside. So I reach in and flip the switch, and I see my oldest son, who was about 5 at the time, sitting in the middle of the bedroom floor in nothing but his underwear, hugging his pillow and laughing hysterically like he's about to wet himself. He is just rolling with laughter. And so I open the door the rest of the way, and I see my youngest son, about 3. He's up on the top bunk of the bed. He's got one foot on the edge of the bed and one against the edge of the wall, and a motorcycle helmet, or a football helmet on his head. A football helmet on his head. And I'm looking at him thinking, what is he doing? And then suddenly, he looks at me and goes, hey, Dad, watch this. And he shoves himself off the bed as hard as he can. The bed, bam, slams into the wall. The whole wall shakes. And he launches himself across the room. Now, it's one of those things that kind of happens in slow motion because I can see him flying and I see the arc of where he's going. And he didn't just jump out as far as he could, he jumped as high as he could. And he's about to hit the ceiling fan that's spinning at full speed. And I said, stop that, you're going to hit the ceiling fan. He falls to the floor, he rolls over, he looks up at me, taps his helmet and says, that's what I'm trying to do. And I thought, good grief, what is wrong with this kid? Now, here's what I want you to understand. It is altogether possible, and sometimes common, for us to do something intentionally, meaning that's what I was trying to do, but I didn't really think about the outcome or the eventuality of having accomplished it. That's really the distinction between purposefully and intentionally. Did I understand what the long-term consequences would be of doing this thing, of making this decision? Or did I simply make a decision and act on it? I heard someone else use the analogy that if the CFO came to the CEO and said, hey, we have this opportunity in this new line of business, and if we move forward with this, we may make a lot of money, but we'll also impact the environment negatively. And the CEO responded and said, yes, let's make a lot of money. Was the CEO intentionally destroying not the economy, the earth, the ozone, the global life quality? If you allowed profits to be of more importance than ecology and the ozone and global life quality, did you intentionally focus on profits, or did you intentionally focus on destroying the ozone and the quality of life globally, etc.? And that is the big question. Profit or environment? Profit or environment? If you choose one over the other, your choice is an intentionality. But do you intentionally destroy the environment by focusing on your income? Now, let's ask the question the other way. If the opportunity came and the CFO said, listen, we have a chance to make a lot of money and to do good for the environment. And the CFO said, let's make a lot of money. I don't care about the environment. Even though the end result was he did good for the environment, was he intentional about doing good for the environment? Or was he, like in the first scenario, focused on the income and not the environment? And so even if he did good or bad for the environment, his intentionality doesn't apply. See, one of the challenges we run into with that worldview is that our intentionality is as much commission as omission. What we didn't intentionally avoid, we may have intentionally caused. Follow that? I was listening again to a presentation by Anthony Robbins. I've listened to it many, many times, but I've listened to it again this morning. And one of the things he was talking about is how we in our human needs are driven more by emotion than by facts. Well, we can know all the right facts, but we're not going to make the right decision until the emotions line up with A, the state that we're in, and B, the state that we're choosing to pursue. Now, the problem with that is if we're not in control of our emotions, if we're not making decisions about our emotions because we're controlling our emotions, but instead we're allowing our emotions to make decisions for us, the way that our outcome is going to be determined is not going to be a healthy outcome. 5 different people can witness exactly the same event as eyewitnesses, as participants, as victims, and as they witness that event, what they don't perceive is the intention of the actor. What they do perceive is the emotional state that they're already in when it happens. And so their receiving emotion is of more purpose and impact in that incident or event than is the intention of the actor to begin with. I can give you a good example of that, and it really seems innocuous. I was driving home yesterday, coming home for a meal with friends and family, and as I'm driving down the road, on a 2-lane road, there's a concrete barrier on the inside lane where they've been doing some construction, which means the inside lane's a little narrow already. The outside lane has a curb, and although there's a lot of room and grass past the curb before you get to the fence line, I mean probably 40, 50 yards, there's a car stopped in the roadway, in the lane of traffic. Now, this is an area that, before the construction zone was set up, was a 60-mile-an-hour speed zone. While construction up it's supposed to be 45. No one that drives there drives it. People pass me when I'm driving 45, honk at me, and give me the one-fingered salute. So no one is driving 45. And I'm driving in the outside lane, and as I come around the corner into this construction zone, there's a car stalled in the outside lane against the curb with his turn signals on. But the gentleman is actually sitting in the car on the passenger side with his feet out on the curb. And it was everything I could do at 45, 50 miles an hour to bring my Suburban to a stop in a safe stopping distance while the other cars zoomed by me, honking at me and giving me the one-fingered salute for stopping in traffic. Well, the reason I stopped is because he's in a tiny little sedan and I'm in a big Suburban. If somebody is going to hit something, my Suburban's got a lot more stopping power and a lot more safety, if you will, for the impact than his little car does. And I'm strapped into a seatbelt. He's sitting halfway out his door. Hitting that car could kill him instantly. Not to mention the damage it could do to somebody else. So I stopped a little further back. I turned on my flashers. I called the police department to get someone out there to block the road in an official capacity. And while we're sitting there waiting, the gentleman, after probably 10 or 15 minutes while we're waiting on the cops, the gentleman finally gets out of his car and starts walking back toward us. He makes it about 4 or 5 steps and he falls, collapses to the ground. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, don't tell me this guy is drunk and that's why he stopped in the middle of the road. And so we walk, my wife gets out of the car and we walk toward him and he says, I have MS. And so his capacity physically is limited, although his mind is sharp as a tack. And we find that he's parked there because he's had a blowout. So now we've got a guy who's not physically capable of changing his tire, stranded in a lane of traffic in a high-speed area, and every car that's coming behind us is honking at us, flipping us off, yelling at us. Now, was I doing a bad thing blocking traffic? No. I was doing a good thing helping someone else who was a stranded motorist. But what I was doing for him, and the way that it made him feel that someone would stop and help him, and I'm sure the way he felt that we got his tire on and he was able to go on with his day, had zero impact on the emotional state of the drivers who were just annoyed at the fact that someone had stopped on the side of the road. The ones who came flying up in our lane because they saw the other lane slowing down, and they thought, well, if that lane's going to slow down, I'm going to zoom around them, and then realized the reason they were slowing down is because there was a disabled vehicle, and now they're stuck not only not in the lane of traffic that's moving, but behind the car that's not moving at all, and they're irritated they can't get back into the lane that has now compressed very slowly. And so their anger and frustration is coming out of their honks and the way they're driving and their aggressive driving and the hand signals that we're getting along the way. Again, was intentionality, was my intention to block traffic? No. Was my intention to annoy people? No. Was my intention to disrupt the day of all of these people in traffic? No. Had nothing to do with that. Not that I didn't think about them, because while I waited on the police to arrive, I sat in my vehicle with my tires facing over that curb. In fact, I got two of my tires up over that curb because, as much as I was concerned about him, my granddaughter was in the truck with me. And if I was watching in the mirror and saw that someone wasn't going to be able to stop, I'm going to jump the curb and use that 50 yards of space to get out of their way. I was intentional about guarding myself and guarding my family. I was also intentional about trying to protect someone else who was stranded. But that intentionality didn't transfer to the people stuck in traffic. I hope you're following me. It's really important to understand that the intentionality that you approach life with, the things that you do, may move other people to do something different. But it doesn't inspire them until their emotional state is changed as well. And that takes a whole different level of inspiration. See, a lot of people feel like if I'm intentionally doing something, then there's this overwhelming, maybe subconscious, maybe ethereal, maybe spiritual driving force behind what I'm doing with intentionality. Now, if you continue to study in the mind sciences and the law of attraction and things of that nature, you will find that intentionality is a practice of people who live in that world. Intentionality is a practice of focusing your emotion, focusing your energy on a particular object. It may be an object that you want, it may be a change that you want, it may be a thing that you want to own. But in that worldview, that intentionality can shape the subconscious world, not only your own internal world, but shape the world around you and molecularly impact the universe. Inspiration, on the other hand, is an entirely different thing. Most people confuse them. I've been inspired, I've been intentional about, and if you see them sequentially, that's the right way to see it. But sequentially, inspired and intentionality should always be led by inspired, followed by intentionality. So an example might be someone like Mother Teresa, who was inspired by her faith. She was inspired by the Spirit of God. In her words, the Spirit of God came upon her, told her to do a certain thing. And she went about the rest of her life intentionally focused on that thing. In fact, her intention was so steep, her desire to see that thing fulfilled was so powerful that when people would get around her and say, what caused you to do this? And what would you say to others? And blah, blah, blah. She would look at them and say, don't say, do. Stop talking. Just do. Do what you know needs to be done. Take action, activate on something that you know is that important. If it means that much to you, stop talking about it. Don't just write about it. Do something about it. Take action. And when you're driven by something you feel like God has put inside you, not just a notion that you came up with in your own head and put a lot of focus on, but something that came from outside of you and was imparted into you, when that's what drives you to do what you do, it comes with the emotional state necessary to make it happen. When Mother Teresa did what she did, when she fed millions of children, when she blessed millions of children, when she prayed over the sick and laid hands on the sick and prayed for even those who were dying, it was the spirit inside her, ignited by the Spirit of God, and then intentionally focused in her activity, that caused the result that we see still today impacting the world. You can look back over history and see millions of people who have made their mark in this life, who were first inspired and then very intentional about their inspiration. The challenge is, while you might hear the phrase self-inspired, if you look up the definition, and I'm going to challenge you to do that, I might post it in the comments later today, but I want you to look it up. I want you to look up the word inspired and understand what its meaning is. It is not possible to be self-inspired. It's possible to be self-motivated. It's not possible to be self-inspired. And if your intentionality is driven by yourself, in the end it will be selfish. If your intentionality is driven by inspiration, in the end it will benefit everyone else in an entirely different capacity. Not just the human need to be fulfilled by helping others, but it will be a driven course, like an outside set of rules, an outside set of ideas, an outside business plan. Can you imagine what it would be like if you sat down over coffee and someone walked in and sat down across the table from you and said, "Don't tell anybody, but I have this business plan that will take this amount of investment, and I already have the investors lined up, and it'll take this amount of teamwork, and I already have the team lined up, and it'll take this amount of accomplishment over a period of time, and these are the people who are going to be impacted, and this is how they'll be impacted, and this is the opportunity for you, and here's where you fit in, and I just need you to take this business plan and start today doing something with it." There's no cost to the business plan. There's no franchise fee up front. There's no involvement necessary on your part other than take the instructions that I'm giving you and take action on those instructions. How phenomenal would your life be if the breadth of your impact, the depth of your impact were already defined? If someone had already told you, if you'll just do these 5 things, you'll make this kind of impact in the world. If you knew that to be true, what would stop you from taking action on that? See, that's what it means to be inspired. To have an inside understanding from outside knowledge, something greater than you imparted to you, placed on the inside of you, that emotionally, spiritually, mentally, physically drives you to do what yesterday you thought was impossible. Intentionality is a powerful force. Intentionality will cause us to do incredible things. But intentionality is a self-driven force. Intentionality is a self-oriented decision. Being intentional about something is great, it's powerful, and it's necessary. But we can also do things unintentionally, or do one thing intentionally that has unintended consequences. When we're inspired and we follow the instructions of the inspiration, we have to understand that the inspirer is an outside force who already has the knowledge, the wisdom, and the understanding of all consequences, intended or otherwise. That is a huge difference. That is a huge difference. Now understand that we can be inspired by negative things as well. We can be inspired by negative things. Watch the media. Watch the hype sometimes of things that happen when an incident takes place, and all the negativity that's thrown at that. The spirit of that negativity, the attitude of that negativity, the rage and the anger and the outrage that may not even be felt or expressed by people who are involved in the event, but all of it's heaped on from the outside, can inspire us to behave in violent ways. Yeah, happens all the time. And that violence is a very highly emotionally charged, even though outside inspired, intentionality. We want to seek justice. We want to seek revenge. We want to express ourselves in the most extreme way. And if we can't find a way to express in an extreme way through good, then we will express in an extreme way through violence. Riots, mob mentality takes over. That's an inspiration. It's an outside force causing something new to happen inside of you. And that mob mentality will cause people to behave in ways that are absolutely unbelievable. We talked about synergy in a previous segment of this lesson, of this series. And synergy is when two forces have a combined or exponential result greater than the sum of the two individual working together. So if party A can do 10 things and party B can do 10 things, the two of them together mathematically normally would do 20 things, but instead they can do exponentially more than that. What one wouldn't do alone and two wouldn't do alone, the two of them together will do. When inspiration, like a mob mentality, a negative outrage, a temper tantrum, begins to take over a larger group, that inspiration becomes synergistic as well. And it will expand and it will grow and it will influence like a cancer. It will inspire others to do things they shouldn't be doing that before they wouldn't have done. And it impacts their intentionality. I would have never, not in a million years, would I think of picking up a trash can and throwing it through the front window of a building and doing all kinds of damage to someone else's retail establishment. It's not the kind of thought that goes through our mind. And if you were to ask half a dozen of the people who end up in the middle of a riot, they didn't really get up that morning thinking, wow, sometime today I'm going to burn a limo. I'm going to go set someone's house on fire. I'm going to go loot a store. They didn't get up in the morning with an intentional plan to do that. But at some point they were inspired by the mob mentality, inspired by the course of events. Now let's go back to the traffic. Think about the mob mentality and the impact that they have. They've been inspired by an outside course of events. They've been inspired by the negativity of a mob mentality. They've been inspired by the activity of others, which may be harmful. But just like the auto accident or the auto event on the highway, I didn't set out to invoke anger and frustration and annoyance with all the people who were passing me in traffic. It was not my intention. I did not get up in the morning and say, I'm going to piss off a bunch of people in traffic. I'm going to block the road for half an hour and cause everyone else to change into one lane and slow way down on their way home or on their way to see someone else. That wasn't my intention. It wasn't my plan. But the rage, the cars that were slamming on their brakes, the ones that didn't pay attention because they were texting or looking at something else or not thinking about the road ahead. Now, the irony is, from where I was, sitting in my mirror, I could see almost 2 miles behind me because of the topography of the road and the hills. I know that if they were paying attention to further down the road rather than staring at their speedometer or the road right in front of their car or the car right in front of them or their cell phone or the person in the car, if their perception of life was a little broader, if they literally looked a little further down the road, the ability to see that there was a stalled car there was available to them. It doesn't mean they acted on it. It doesn't mean they saw. But just because I never intentionally set out to disrupt traffic doesn't change the inspired mentality of all of these people. Well, that one cut me off because I was trying to get out of that lane. He wouldn't let me over. And you see what I'm saying? We've all been there. We've been in that construction zone where we're frustrated, we're behind time already, and now there's some other added delay. And everybody's being rude. And everybody knows that the people in that lane have to get in this lane and nobody wants to give them space and blah, 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 right? But it's more about the emotional state we were already in and the inspiration of that outside influence. And now the behavior begins to go into this vicious cycle where what was not intended is inspired to do something else, and the emotion attaches to it, and like this massive swirling centrifugal force of bad emotion and bad inspiration, you've got the potential for road rage. You've got the potential for bad actors to do unbelievable things. And all of that is a direct result of one inspiration and uncontrolled intentionality. In this lesson, what I'm hoping to illustrate to you is the significant difference between being inspired and being intentional. Inspiration is an outside actor. Intentionality is an internal choice. But that internal choice, that intentionality, is often directly impacted by your emotional state. Which means if you don't well choose your emotional state, you are going to act on these outside forces with intentionality in a way that you'll look back and go, wow, did I really say that? Wow, did I really act like that? Wow, did I really? And the emotional state that you're in is the greater indicator of all those things, not even the outside influences, not even the things that are happening around you, not even the circumstances, but how you keep yourself in an emotional state. And the challenge is, and Tony Robbins probably does better work on this than anybody else. I would challenge you even to go to YouTube and just type in Anthony Robbins and intentionality, or Anthony Robbins and emotional state, or Anthony Robbins and state. Now, there's plenty of content out there. Of course, if you want to spend a couple $1,000s and go to his 50-hour event, that's encouraged as well. If you're a believer, pray up before you go there and make sure that your spirit is in the right place, because your emotions can be manipulated. Your mind, will, and emotions are your soul. They're separate from your spirit, but they can be manipulated in a way that you will do things that wouldn't always jive with your spirit. So be prayed up before you go to do that. But the idea that your emotional state, I'm mad, I'm jealous, I'm angry, I'm frustrated, will stay with you. I know some people who get in an emotional state of depression or anger or frustration with their job, and they keep that emotional state for years. Not hours, not minutes, not weeks or days, but years. And multiple years later, they come back and they go, I don't know why I've just been so tired and exhausted and irritable. I don't understand it. Well, it's the emotional state that they've chosen to live in, because they haven't chosen to intentionally change that. So inspiration is an outside force causing, motivating, changing, impacting your thoughts and everything going on in you. It's a spirit brought into you. That's what it means. Look it up. It's a spirit brought into you. When the spirit moves inside you and motivates you, and that may be a good spirit, may be a bad spirit. Intentionality is a mind-driven, personally driven way of doing things, a way of approaching things. And there are many who believe, and I don't disagree, I believe there's a proper context for it, but I don't disagree, that the intentionality of your mind, will, and emotions can impact the universe around you. It can impact other people. Quantum physics tells us through the theory of entanglement that we do impact everyone around us that we've been in a relationship with. And that intentionality, that negative attitude, is extremely important. That emotional state can impact people from across the room. The electrical vibrations that you're sending out, the chemicals your body is releasing, they impact people. And you think I'm kidding? Just go look up all the types of service dogs that are out there. There are service dogs for PTSD. There are service dogs for diabetes. There are service dogs for neurological issues. There are service dogs for people who have seizures. There are service dogs for people who are blind, obviously, and people who are missing limbs. But the service dogs that serve in an area, like my friend who has PTSD, he comes to the 5K run that we do every year at one of the places in Fort Worth. He brings his dog every year. Beautiful German Shepherd. All the kids want to pet this dog. And because he has PTSD, he really gets frustrated when he's surrounded by a bunch of people. His dog has the ability to smell the chemical change in his body when he's suffering with PTSD. When the rage starts to come up and his body is releasing all the adrenaline of fight or flight, the dog will take him out of that crowd. And so the kids may be gathering around to pet the dog. You're not supposed to pet a service dog anyway, but the kids are gathering around to pet the dog, and the man's body chemistry is changing because he's freaking out, and the dog will escort him off somewhere else. Because the dog knows how to behave when the man can't cognitively, intentionally change his circumstances. That's a powerful thing to know, that a dog can help with that. But how many people don't have a service dog who deal with PTSD? They deal with depression, they deal with anxiety in crowds, they deal with the loss of a loved one. And so all that emotion is still bottled up in them. and they intentionally behave in a way that they think is controlling it. They don't understand the emotional state that they're in. And so every piece of outside information is poking at that emotional state. It doesn't matter how kind you are to them when you buy them a cup of coffee, you'll probably irritate them because it's the wrong flavor, or you put too much sweetener in it, or not enough cream in it. No amount of your doing good for them while they're in that state will be received as good. You follow me? I know this is a complicated lesson. The next ones are not quite as bad, but I really feel like this series, and I thought there was only going to be 3 or 4. Turns out there are 10 altogether, so I have a total of 10. This is number 5. Intentionality is not inspiration. They are completely different. One is an inside determination, the other is outside input. When you can see the difference in those and how they apply to your life, I think it's going to make a huge difference. I also think all of these 10 together may become a book because they work so well together and they're so important. Understanding that competence and confidence are not the same is pretty important. That synergy and synchronicity are not the same. That's pretty important. So as we work through this list, and when we get to the bottom of 10, I will consider making that a book because I think it's something that could have great impact as we go on. I know it's a little deep, but I really do believe if you'll get your emotional state in the right place, if you'll act intentionally, and if you'll make your long-term decisions based on inspiration, not just your own driven wants and needs for the moment, you'll find yourself much further down the road. I am J Loren Norris, and you've been watching Tell It Like It Is TV. Please like and subscribe. We are live on Facebook right now, live streamed on Facebook. We're also live streamed on YouTube. We are now available on iTunes podcasts, so it takes about 24 hours for this daily message to be uploaded through the process to the iTunes podcast. But if you're a podcaster on iTunes, if you're a user of podcast on iTunes, you can subscribe to the channel, and every day you will get the new update. At this point, all of them are free. Now, there are some of the lessons, some of these segments of series, like this one and like the one on attitude, that will be for sale before the end of the year. I haven't picked a date on that yet. So right now they're free. If you want to go download them, go get them and download them and use them in whatever capacity that you need to. I am available to teach these face-to-face if you want to hire me to come in and do that, whether it's a keynote speech or it's a day-long workshop or seminar or just a breakout session at one of your events. I've done these attitude breakouts. I've done 90-minute lessons for them for government leaders in Congo, the University of Kinshasa in the Congo, as well as government leaders in Congo. We'll be doing another one in D.C. in September. I've done these for GE Capital and for the National PTA and the State of Georgia PTA. The leadership teaching, the attitude stuff that I use works very good for that level of leadership. So I'm glad to come in and do that, whether it's your church or your government office or your business. And of course, the conversation is going to be apropos for that audience, not just bland for what I teach in general. I'd love for you to subscribe. I'd love for you to share. I'd love for you to take a look at the Tell It Like It Is merchandise page on Square, and there are plenty of resources available there. But more than anything else, I'd love for you to engage. So if you like what we're saying, just hit the like button, share it with somebody else, comment, feedback, give me your questions. I'd love to answer them. And I appreciate you being a part of what we're doing here at Tell It Like It Is. Let us know how we can help. Have a blessed day.